Welcome to the EnvirowatchNL podcast with myself, Robert Loder.
And with me, Glenn Wheeler. And Robert, this is episode number 1 of our podcast, number 1 and counting. And later, we'll bring listeners up to date on the latest news in the fight to defend land and water in Newfoundland from those mammoth wind energy developments. But first things first, why don't we tell listeners a little bit about EnvirowatchNL?
Great idea, Glenn. So EnvirowatchNL was launched just over a year ago. It was founded by a group of volunteers in order to raise more awareness and protection for the environment of Newfoundland and Labrador. It not only covers the wind energy proposals, but also other aspects that cause environmental damage and irreversible destruction, such as mining, aquaculture industry, and of course, our ever-present forestry. And now, like we said, our wind industry is about to take more land over than any of those.
Yes. And of course, there are many environmental organizations in the province doing great work. And but I think what we found is that there's been a relative silence on these sort of issues of the day, like wind energy. And it's been citizens in the areas affected that have had to step up. And one of the issues with the existing environmental organizations is the constraints caused by government funding. If you're getting government funding, you're a little bit reluctant to speak out against the hand that feeds you because there are staff positions involved, there are project budgets. And so in no way do we diminish the great work being done by these other organizations, but we felt there was a need to take on governments, provincial, federal, directly on these on the issues of the day. And Robert, listeners might have seen our previous forums, and one of which you were a star, shall we say, of one of our forums. So our podcasts are kind of like an offshoot, I guess, of our online forums.
Yeah, it was a great platform, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on that forum. I did actually watch the earlier forum on wind energy and as well the forum on the aquaculture industry, both which I found very fascinating. And those can, I believe, both be viewed on the EnvirowatchNL website or on their Facebook page. And I recommend people go ahead and check those out as well if you're concerned. But this is a little different. We're going to be trying to do a little bit of more of a podcast that's more accessible for people. So we hope that you tune in and follow along.
Yeah. And of course, wind energy is only one of the things going on in the province right now in terms of development that impacts on land and water. We have lots of mining, of course, all the way from the southwest to the northeast, a big ribbon of gold mines. We have expansion of aquaculture being proposed for the south coast. We have, oh my God, even a uranium mine maybe going in on the northern peninsula. So there's no shortage of issues of concern. But wind energy is kind of like an issue that encompasses everything. It has so many aspects to it. People will have heard people from the areas affected, like you, Robert, talking about the impact on their areas. But anyone who's concerned about protecting land and water in the province have to be concerned about wind energy because it affects land, it affects water, it will affect salmon in terms of water and the health of our rivers. So it's one of those global encompassing issues that will affect everything. So it is ground zero in the fight to defend the ever decreasing amounts of natural heritage we have in the province. So this is, this is about everything, fighting these wind energy developments.
That's absolutely right. So these developments, as we know, they take up huge swaths of land. They're going to change the characteristics of the environment, possibly displace large amounts of wildlife, condense moose hunters to the same area for the same hunting as they traditionally used to. So you're going to have a smaller hunting area available. Again, with the water, the amount of water being taken out of our atmosphere or our environment, it will definitely have an impact on our salmon populations as well as our local fishery populations. Again, with the turbines in place, they will impact mortality rates of avian species, including bats and eagles, ospreys, large birds that cats and windows don't really impact right now. As well, we're going to have a lot of groundwater disturbance from the construction of the roads, the gravel pollution from the heavy equipment and the vehicles on the roads. I can just basically sit here all day, but the biggest concern is the vast amount of land that's going to be irreversibly changed and not for a positive benefit of the people of Newfoundland.
Hmm. So let's break it down for people who haven't been following closely. Let's give them first an overview of what is proposed in for the province in terms of these projects. The one that people have heard most about is World Energy GH2 on the Port-au-Prince Peninsula and in the Codroy Valley, and there is provincial environmental approval for that project, subject to conditions. But I just saw recently, Robert, they're just doing their bird study now for the area affected. So they get their approval, and then they find out about the impact on the bird population that you just described. So a little bit strange. So we have World Energy GH2, and then in your area we have Everick. We have a substantial project out your way. Give us the particulars of that one, the Everick plan.
Well, certainly the project here in the Exploits Valley, it's under control of the Exploits Valley Renewable Energy Corporation, which sounds like a nice down-home company full of locals, but unfortunately it's actually run by two college buddies from Waterloo, or they went to Waterloo University together. Currently, one is living in Romania, the other one is living in Hong Kong. They are planning to install over 3 gigawatts of industrial wind turbines, well over 200 meters tall, or near 700 feet tall, in order to produce ammonia to ship overseas. And now the lands that required for this project is, I believe, 300 square kilometers. I'll have to double check that figure, but
How many turbines in that plant?
That plant has between 450 to 500 turbines, according to their last information session. Now
So
they stated
that's almost
452.
twice as big as the World Energy GH2 plant, because that's 320 turbines. So that's quite a bit bigger than World
Yes.
Energy.
Well, and then if you want to get bigger again, you can look at ABO out by Clarenville, and they have, I believe, 1,000, between 800 and 1,000 turbines planned for that area.
Wow.
So
And
again,
then on the south coast, on the Burin Peninsula, we have the Everwind plan, and Everwind is also a company active in Nova Scotia that's got fairly bad press about their lack of consultation with people. That seems to be a theme that continues, lack of consultation. And then in Argentia, we have the Pattern Energy project. So a lot of a lot of things in the works. And and you talk about the cutting there, and just for the World Energy GH2 plan, the new road construction there, new and expanded roads is more than 300 kilometers.
yes.
And I think, Robert, we're not talking about trike trails when we're talking about road construction here.
No, we're looking at basically full lane highways, bigger than what the Trans-Canada going across the island would be in a lot of places, in my opinion. We still haven't gotten clarification from the company out here in Exploits on how wide the right of way will be or their roads. But they are planning as well. So like I said, for Exploits, they're planning on developing 200 kilometers of new access roads, and improving, they'll say, 200 existing forest access roads. So a lot of these roads haven't been used in decades for some of them, and they look nothing more than a game path. So they plan to come in and clear out massive right of ways, possibly over 100 feet wide, possibly up to 200 feet wide, just to get the equipment through this area.
Yeah, because I mean they need to bring in these huge. The blades on these turbines are huge, so they need the width. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that you're going to need a fairly large space to bring in the components and the equipment to put them up. Cranes, all kinds of heavy equipment. So you're going to need substantial roads to for the space and for the weight
Absolutely.
on the roads.
So then that means that we need to change all the bridges for crossing all the rivers. So, I mean, it's a little bit different to have a big rig carrying a load of logs out than it is to have a multi-axle, heavy duty, and I could say heavy duty more than a load of logs that's allowed on the road. We've got these, I believe they're 80-ton turbine load components coming in with these trucks. If you've ever watched a video online about these blades being transported, is just astronomical to look at. So, and then with the road clearing, each turbine in exploits is going to have approximately 15 acres cleared as well for the laydown and construction areas. And on top of that as well, that's not included, is the transmission line right away. So they're going to have high voltage transmission lines networking through our forests as well. So the amount of land that's going to be cleared and changed in order for these projects to develop is almost unfathomable.
Hmm. Now, the other thing about the land is where the land is, and we know that where they wind is the resource that they're interested in, and wind, as we know, blows is strongest at the higher elevation. So a lot of these turbines are going at on top of, for example, the Anglo Mountains in the Codroy Valley. Um, so we're talking here about sensitive areas. They'll be the source of rivers in many cases. They'll be at the height of land and the source of water. So we're dealing with, in many cases, sensitive areas that have an impact on the health of our salmon, for example. And we have scheduled salmon rivers in the Codroy Valley that might be impacted by these developments because of where the turbines are going to be located.
Yes, well, where, like you said, where these turbines are going to be placed on the higher elevation with these new roads constructed that are only going to be gravel access roads, all the sediment and the silt that's going to be running off from the transportation and even anytime it rains is going to be going down into the ecosystem. So it's not just the salmon and the fish that will be impacted, it's going to be all the wildlife that drinks that water from the stream. So the amount of impact to the wildlife is it can't be overstated enough how dangerous it is for any of these projects.
Hmm. And of course, uh, this comes at a time of climate change. And out on the Port Peninsula a few months ago, there was a very serious weather development, a lot of flooding. Um, Roads were washed out. And at the time, we made a comment that if these developments go through in that area, this might aggravate these issues. And people sort of like took us to task by saying we're using this for political reasons, to use this time of trauma for people to push our own agenda. But I think we have to think about these these phenomena called the atmospheric river, where because of climate change, the wind patterns are different. So sometimes these huge storms they kind of stall, whereas before they might have moved on, but this feature, this risk, I haven't seen any consideration in the World Energy GH2 plan about how to respond to this risk. What's the plan when we get these expected developments, these atmospheric rivers, which are also, of course, we saw down in Port aux Basques in the big storm down there. So they're proceeding as if climate change is not an issue.
Well, that's the funny thing. Well, I say funny, but it's just funny, ironic. If you don't have to look back very far. I know that we have the weather events that cause some significant visual impacts over on the port and down in the West Coast. But you just have to look back towards Hurricane Fiona and that damages that did across the province, as well as Hurricane Igor before that. So, with the prediction of a more and more intense hurricane seasons happening on the east coast of Canada and the US, with more named storms being developing each year, I just don't see the positives of clearing our forests in order to place these temperamental, intermittent wind turbines that are going to be polluting our environment even more from leading edge wear into our ecosystems. I'm still struggling to find any benefits of this.
Mm. Now, speaking of water, let's talk about the huge amount of water that's involved in these projects. And in Newfoundland and Labrador, we think we have lots of everything, lots of water, lots of wildlife, lots of land, lots of trees. But let's talk about water and the huge amounts of water that go into the production of hydrogen, because this, of course, is wind to hydrogen. So wind is used to produce hydrogen that's supposed to be turned into ammonia for shipment to Europe, according to the plan. But just in terms of the wind to hydrogen, let's talk about the huge amounts of water that are involved at different stages of the process. And what describe for us where water comes into the picture in hydrogen production?
So I'm going to go off of the reference that I have here. It's from the World Energy GH2 environmental impact statement that's on the government's website for anybody to review. So there's a little diagram. It shows where the hydrogen and the water comes into play here. It doesn't give numbers specifically in this chart, but it says that basically you follow the raw water intake. It goes to a pump station, it goes to a pipeline, plant storage, and then it goes for primary treatment. Following that, it goes to either the potable water system, which goes further into treatment for the process, or it goes into cooling water, which results as vapor loss due to the heat, or it can go to the cooling water for the blowdowns. So then we have the treated water going to the process water that goes into the electrolyzer, and then it recycles again. And then there's a portion, I believe it was 30 to 35%, that will end up 35% of the total process water will end up as outfall, as cooling and other discarded amounts. So just from the table 2.8 on the World Energy GH2 EIS, it says that for average daily water use, it will be basically 2.9 thousand um, 2.9 thousand cubic meters per day. So a cubic meter, for people who don't know, it's 1,000 liters. So it's one of those steel water totes that you see around people have on their cabins, or you can see chemicals being delivered in them. So we're talking over almost 3,000 as average water daily use just for one project, not including the outfall, I believe. So this is just for the electrolyzer. You can add another 35% for the outfall water and the wastewater. So the max daily demand will possibly be up to almost 9,000. It says 8.8 thousand cubic meters a day. So 8 million liters a day, almost 9 million liters a day is a maximum. That's just for the Port-au-Port wind farm operating. If you include the Codroy Valley wind farm operating, it average daily water use, it says here 5.895 thousand or 5,895 cubic meters a day, or maximum daily demand is almost 18,000 liters a day, or sorry, 18,000 cubic meters today a day. But then if you look at the last column, it says future expansion. That can go up as high as 26,528 cubic meters per day. So that again, if you multiply that by 1,000, that's your actual liters per day. So that's roughly 26 million liters a day that they have for future expansion, just for one project on the West
Well,
Coast.
so for arts majors like me who are not scientifically inclined, I mean, just thinking about in terms of the number of liters, a carton of milk and the millions of those in water used at a time when in certain areas in the Bay St. George area, there are already concerns about water supply, not very much pressure on the water, and the water. I think we think of water as being an infinite supply. You can never run out of air, for example, and we think of the water as the same way. But is that do you think that's the case? Water comes from aquifers underground, and I don't know how long we can uh, haul these millions of liters out of out from underground before something bad happens.
That's exactly right. So in Newfoundland, we're blessed with having an abundance of clean natural water in our area, which is filtered through our natural water cycle as it filters through our bogs and our gravel. It settles into our aquifers, as you mentioned, and it flows along in our streams and eventually reaches the ocean. Um, so the water here will definitely be impacted. It will be taken out of our ecosystems, like you said, which could possibly impact our um, aquifer levels, which again, is going to be noticed by residents in the areas. So another issue that's going to be impacted with the water as well, as I mentioned before, is the sediment runoff and the the leading edge wear erosion from the turbine blades. So the nanoparticles, which contain BPA, will enter our ecosystem and can travel for miles and miles with the wind blown. So you're going to have these microplastics as well as the gravel, and as well you're going to have blasting and you're going to have construction, which are going to disrupt the naturally occurring water tables in the environment, which has been known to prove that there can be higher levels of arsenic, naturally occurring arsenic in the waters if you disrupt the water tables and their processes as well. So there's so many concerns here with the water that it just doesn't seem like the EIS or the studies are being accurate in the risks and the impacts that will potentially come from these developments.
Mm. Wow, that's pretty intense. I mean, water, we can't live without water. So, you know, to uh, to play games with the water doesn't sound like in the best interests of people.
No, and you mentioned as well, like you can't run out of water. That's what people think, like you can't run out of air. But whenever there's a forest fire, they recommend you staying indoors for respiratory concerns. So again, if the water contaminates in our areas, where do we get fresh water?
Mm. So, water, the land, 15% of the land area of Newfoundland potentially affected by these developments. And it's interesting to compare that 15% to the amount of land in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador right now that is protected, wilderness protection. We have one of the worst records in the country for wilderness protection. We're under 10%. The Canadian objective is to have 25% wilderness protection. I can't see how the province of Newfoundland and Labrador can even get to half that with 15% of the land and this is the very land that we're trying to protect. This is wilderness area because the one of the reasons why it is natural is because it's at in awkward spots where Kruger and the other paper companies have been able to get it. So this is the last remaining land that we can include in our in wilderness preservation. So it's the chances of Newfoundland making the standard if this goes through, I think, Robert, is remote, shall we say.
Oh, absolutely, Glenn. And just to remind our listeners as well that this is only phase one of these wind to hydrogen developments or wind power developments in our province. So a lot of these proponents already had plans for expansion into offshore energy or expanding their onshore wind farm location. Or sorry, I don't like to call them wind farms. It was more of a wind industrial facility. So this is only phase one. So I mean, we could quickly, if the government is left unchecked and they don't listen to what the people are saying and requesting, and putting our concerns forward, then it's quickly the amount of land for these wind facilities is quickly going to overtake anything that we do have protected already, or the ability to protect, like you said. So the government needs to really sit back and look at what they're doing for the long-term future of our province in the next 7 generations, I'll say.
Yeah, do you want to live in an industrial park, I guess, or do you want to live in a with some natural heritage around you?
That's exactly right. So with the current uptake too of people homesteading and self-sustainability, we're really positioned in a, I know our weather isn't always great, but we have everything we need to be self-sufficient. We've done it for hundreds of years before we were ever part of Canada or joined into the Federation. But this Newfoundland outport communities have a history of growing their own vegetables, raising their own livestock, living off the land, hunting and fishing. So if you take that away from us, then there's not going to be any incentive for people to want to stay here anymore or live here. Right now, in my area in exploits, we have a large population of people moving back from the mainland who spent their lives working in other provinces and other parts of the world, and they want to come and reconnect with nature and live in harmony with nature. But if you take that away, then these communities are destined to fail. There's not going to be anybody coming in to purchase the homes, to stay in these areas, to maintain the services. You're just going to have a few handful of people until the population completely dies off. And as well, there was a comment made about transitioning workers away from the seasonal work in order to get these projects developed. They're saying that it's going to be permanent full-time work year round for these individuals. But they don't seem to understand that a lot of the jobs in the seasonal industries are always going to be there. There's a lot of seasonal industries that we want to keep developing and working towards, such as the forestry, the fishery, agriculture, tourism, hunting and fishing, outfitting. You can't you can't just say that you're going to come in and create full-time permanent year-round jobs for everybody when you still have these other jobs that need to be done.
Mm. It's too bad we're not putting our money into better broadband for smaller places in the province where people who want to join people already there, people who are working remotely, who can live anywhere and work at their job as long as they have the internet. So I think the internet might be a better investment than these wind turbines.
Absolutely. And like I said, we're in a remote rural area and we actually have satellite internet for Starlink, which I'm speaking to you on Zoom right now, so it works fine for us.
Hmm.
So as well, like you said, you're going to have a lot more availability for people to work from home in IT and the tech departments and other management roles. And that would also reduce global overall carbon emissions. If people didn't have to commute into an office building, they can just work from their home office and grow their own food in their backyard. So
Yes.
like we have such a unique situation to advertise that aspect for remote workers as well that doesn't seem to be taken advantage of right now.
Right. So stay tuned to the EnvirowatchNL podcast for information on those events and all other items related to the natural environment of Newfoundland and Labrador. Robert, nice to see you. See you later.
Good to see you, Glenn. Thanks for having me on this.
All right.